Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico Casa. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices. Living life every day. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Vigilant Voices podcast.
We're so glad you're here. We use this time together to know more about the challenges facing children and families so that we can ensure no child faces continued abuse, neglect, or trauma.
Right. And we talk a lot about what can cause abuse and neglect and what happens or how we might be able to help children after abuse and neglect occurs. But what if we could prevent it?
Right? What if we could protect children, keep them safe?
That is what I'm talking about.
Yes. Okay. And that makes me think of a Casa case story with a teenage girl I'm going to call Tina. Tina has only ever known her father. And at the time she met her Casa advocate, she was living with her father in a hotel room because he had lost his job and they were evicted from their previous home. And before all this had happened, Tina had liked going to school and been a pretty good student. But with this move, her father started working multiple jobs and wanted her to stay home, locked in the hotel where he knew she would be safe.
That's interesting. It gives me pause that what does that safe look like? And so maybe for a time being, but I think it really sounds like the start of what could turn into severe neglect in the case of maybe truancy here. But
yeah, that I hear your concerns, but this is right when Tina's Casa advocate was introduced to the case. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Okay. Well, we know there is a long list of risk factors that can potentially increase the likelihood of abuse and neglect, as well as triggering situations that can contribute to abuse and neglect. But there's also a list of protective factors.
Right. And that's what we want to talk about today. 5 specific protective factors. These are things that we can build or incorporate into a family's life to strengthen the entire family unit, which then protects the children, right? And more than likely will prevent abuse and neglect.
Right. Yes. And these are 5 things that are scientifically proven to minimize the negative outcomes often associated with adverse childhood experiences or ACEs.
Yep, you're right. So I'm going to link to a visual that I found on the Family Support Center website. These are 5 items that you will see cited all over the place, but I specifically liked the way that they had them visually displayed. So that's why I'm sharing their version from their site.
That sounds great. So let's take some time to walk through that list.
Sure.
Right? And so first is resilience. And I do know that we've talked about this in past episodes. And simply put, it's the idea of bouncing back.
Right. And so building up this protective factor of resilience means incorporating things into your family life that help everyone cope with stress. Maybe calming activities, finding time to go outside, playing chill music, getting involved in sports, doing puzzles, whatever outlets may exist that your family recognizes as their go-tos. Those outlets will help them cope when tough days come up.
Exactly. So for resilience, it's really thinking about coping skills and self-care.
Sure.
All right. The second protective factor involves social connections. It's the simple idea that parents who have supports in place parent better.
Yeah, which makes total sense, right? Parents need healthy, supportive relationships. We all do.
Yes.
And sometimes parents need a break. You know, adults need to remain healthy in order to be the best parents possible. And so ideas for places to grow social connections for adults, you know, are within your family and your friends. But then outside of those circles too, you know, places like churches or gyms.
Right. The workout buddy, that accountability partner, right?
Yeah, we all need them, right? Maybe a sports team, maybe a recovery group. You know, it can even be professional support, like engaging with a counselor or a therapist.
Exactly. And I think any and all social support is helpful when building that protective factor.
For sure.
Right. Okay. So the third factor is growing your knowledge and understanding of child development.
Okay.
Right. So the basic concept is this. Parents don't just magically gain a full understanding of child development when they become parents, especially for the first time.
Right. And if they did, we would definitely have safer, healthier, happier homes.
Yes. But it's unrealistic, right? I mean, we know that, to think that parents are just going to know it all.
Yeah.
So they also need to proactively learn about ages and stages of child development, what to expect from their children in each of those ages and stages, and really just having some of that understanding. And it doesn't have to be at the scientific level or the medical level, but at a basic level can really minimize potential conflict.
Yeah. I think building this protective factor is more about recognizing the gaps or seeing that you need to know more, because once you realize the need, there's countless online and in-person resources, parenting classes, and helps in this arena.
Absolutely. There really are a lot of resources. You just have to find one that appeals to you or fits that stage that you and your family are in at that particular time.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that's 3 protective factors so far. Number 4 is about emotional intelligence. So, both children and adults need to learn social and emotional competencies. And it's up to the adults to learn them first, right? In order to be able to model and teach them to their children. So these are things like how to be a good listener, how to accept criticism, how to set healthy boundaries.
Right. I mean, how to accept responsibility for your words and actions, how to empathize, build relationships. I mean, there's a lot of studies out there that EQ is and may be more important than IQ. Right?
Yeah, these are all great examples of emotional intelligence. Okay, so that was number 4.
Right.
And then the 5th and final protective factor is finding concrete supports. Like these are things that will actually offset whatever stress they're dealing with.
Right. And this is probably in some ways the most tangible potentially.
Sure.
So, I mean, it could be something like housing support or childcare or TANF benefits, legal assistance, right?
Yeah. Things that could be offered informally from family and friends or more formally through the Department of Social Services or maybe like a nonprofit organization.
Right. So as just a quick recap, those 5 protective factors are resilience, social connections, knowledge of child development, emotional intelligence, and concrete supports.
Great.
So we've walked through these 5 protective factors, offering ideas for how we as individuals can then help build these supports around families.
Yes.
But it's also important to note that there are higher level things that our communities can be doing to also build these protective factors. So, simple example, companies offering family-friendly work arrangements, that could help offset the potential stress of childcare issues.
Yeah, right. I mean, we could give so many examples. I'm going to link to the prevention strategies and approaches that were published by the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control. Although we all know that after COVID. We all know CDC.
Yes. And listener, you might ask, because we have referenced, right, the CDC a few times, but why does the CDC have information on abuse and neglect? Because it's a center for, disease control.
Right.
And the answer is that child abuse and neglect is considered a serious public health problem. And in fact, the CDC has said it is the single most significant public health problem that our society is dealing with.
Yep, that's right.
And the CDC is, one of many organizations working to understand the problems of child abuse and neglect and trying to provide ways to help prevent them.
Right. And on a much smaller scale, in our case story, we are seeing Tina's advocate and our local Department of Social Services work to prevent potential neglect for Tina. As you'll remember, she was basically living, locked up in a hotel room while her dad worked multiple jobs. And so it was a situation primed for neglect. But it all started to turn around when her CASA advocate started connecting Tina and her father with the right supports to build protective factors. Tina's dad joined a support group for fathers, right? That's that social connection. Tina went back to school and built relationships with specific teachers who offered to help her. Like that's a concrete help, right? They made sure she had clean clothes before the school day started. They helped her get free lunches, which in turn had stopped some bullying that she was receiving. And Tina started participating in counseling. So all of these things helped
Right.
Tina and her father feel seen, feel supported, and they got stronger,
Right.
you know? And the judge on their case is seeing these improvements, recognizing their progress, and is choosing not to remove Tina from her father's care.
Right. And I think it's because they accepted those support systems and then they're embracing them and now they're on the right track.
Right.
And so I think what could have been potentially a very troublesome situation. I mean, you could see physical abuse issues, emotional, educational neglect. I mean, a lot of these scenarios could have played out, but that was prevented.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I thank you for sharing the story as an example.
Yeah. I mean, preventing a child from needing foster care is a definite win. So what should our call to action be today?
So why don't we take a moment and each think of a concrete support that we could offer to someone. There may or may not be someone in our life who needs it at this particular moment. But I think even reflecting and thinking about something that, we all could do when it's necessary is great. And then be ready to actually use it and give it when it's needed.
Yeah, good thoughts. I mean, meals, gift cards, tutoring, furniture, whatever you have that you'd be willing to share, identify it and be ready for the opportunity to rise. Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casa's new podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.